Shalom, brothers and sisters. I want to. There was a particular vision of the night that I had that I want to share once again, in lieu of and in light of recent events. Um, and I posted it, I believe, on my TikTok, and I believe I also posted it on my Facebook. I believe, but I didn't provide a lot of details. I just gave a synopsis or an overview of what I saw. And now, of course, I also this morning posted a status in which I was saying that Yahweh reminded me of a vision that I had several years ago, in which I saw and beheld two big missiles approaching America, and both of them not being intercepted. In other words, they reached they reached beyond the skies. They were able to infiltrate and enter into the region of America, and they were not intercepted, right? But also what Yahweh reminded me of also was a dream that it was not necessarily a dream, it was more of a vision of the night. And there's a difference between visions of the night, dreams, visions, and so forth, right? But I would more identify this as a vision of the night. And I'll revisit again, and I'll give more details, because when I originally posted it on TikTok, and I believe again on Facebook, I did not give all the details. And neither did necessarily provide interpretation. All I said was something is coming. But now I'm led of the Lord to provide more details and to provide interpretation. Right? And so I was seemingly on a plane, a land of a region, right? Where and this particular land that I was on wasn't necessarily very much occupied, meaning there wasn't much infrastructure, meaning like buildings, and it was not an empty field, but it was a piece of land on a region that wasn't necessarily fully occupied, right? It was more so empty plains, but there were some semblance of people and some buildings and so forth, but it wasn't overwhelmingly occupied, if that's the way to say it, right? Nevertheless, my attention was drawn to the skies, and in the skies I beheld and saw clouds forming. Now, of course, in figurative prophetic language or symbolic language with respect to dreams and visions, we know that clouds often can be depicted as Yahweh's glory. We know, of course, in Scripture that when Miriam and Aaron were slandering Moshe, that it said that Yahweh descended as a cloud into the temple, and he summoned them, Miriam and Aaron, to judge them. And of course, as we know, the very, very, very famous manifestation or scriptural identifications of clouds is, of course, the people of Israel, ancient Israel, with regards to the pillar of cloud by day, the cloud by day, and the pillar of fire by night. Those are clouds. Those are all indicative of Yahweh's glory. And of course, another one that's coming to me also is with respect to Solomon. When Solomon finished building the temple, we honor Solomon, my elder. When he built the temple and fulfilled his assignment in that regard, after he said his prayers, as we know, that Yahweh's glory descended into the temple. And it was identified as a cloud, right? So you know that clouds, and Yahweh will use clouds in dreams and symbolically to identify his glory, not all the time. And that is why you need the Ruach HaKodesh to help you interpret dreams. It's not always universal. Oftentimes they're very much contextual, depending upon what you see in the dream or in the vision or so forth. Anyway, I'm a teacher at heart. Nevertheless, I saw clouds forming, and I knew instinctively in the dream that it was indeed a representation of Yahweh's glory. And now, as my eyes fixed upon these clouds, I noticed that something appeared behind the clouds. It was very ominous. And as the clouds began to dissipate, I beheld what was behind the clouds, and it was something very interesting. For those who are aware of Marvel Comics, you will know the superhero. He's an anti-hero, Venom. He is a evil depiction of Spider-Man. Right now, the symbiotic It's hard for those who don't know. It's gonna be hard for you to understand. But I'm just saying this for those who do know, that the symbiotic alien living organism, thank you Lord, that actually possessed the Peter Parker that produces venom. It's a black substance that is symbiotic. It's alive, right? And it moves, and it has its own personality. It's symbiotic, meaning it's sentient. It has its own will. It has its own personality, right? And that is why, of course, in certain recent movies of Venom, you have he's talking to himself, right? The Venom has its own personality, right? So I beheld behind this particular cloud of Yahweh's glory as it dissipated, a similar kind of representation of a black liquid form, like symbiotic entity that was behind the clouds, right? It looked very ominous. I'm not going to say outright demonic, but it wasn't pleasant, right? That's what I beheld. And this thing began to expand. And as it expanded, I'm not going to get into the details again. Just to provide overview. As I beheld it, it fell. It didn't fall, but it descended into the ground. And as it descended into the ground, it began to spread like a tsunami. And then I woke up. And what I was made to understand, which I'm going to provide the interpretation now, is in terms of black. Black in this context is indicative in a similar way to the black horse in Revelation, right? And we know in Revelation it depicted that the black horse was representative of famine and economic hardship, right? The black horse, according to those scriptures, as it's interpreted, we can deduce that it was representative of famine and economic hardship. So what am I saying? As I warned the United States of America that your president's actions will not go unscathed, Russia and China both back Iran. And so there are things that can be done as retaliations to affect the economy. There are things that can be done to affect the economy and produce economic hardship and famine. Not only viruses. Virus is one way, right? A virus is one way, but there are other ways. Oil refineries. Gas being impacted. Trade being impacted. Not only viruses. There are different ways in which you can incur, you can produce famine and economic hardships. Be warned, America. Something is coming. And there are many who are celebrating this, not knowing what's at stake, what's at play, what Yahweh is doing. And there are those who claim to be prophets in America who have a lot to say and glorifying Trump and what he did. They don't know what they're talking about. And they don't know what they're saying, or some of them do, and they're just frauds. They're criminals. They don't speak for the Lord. They don't speak for Yahweh. They're shysters. And they're propagandists. They're Christian nationalists masquerading themselves as prophets. And so that black symbiotic entity or sentient personality that I beheld behind the cloud was of Yahweh's doing. It wasn't the adversary. It wasn't the adversary. It wasn't the adversary. It was by Yahweh. Something is coming. And it's by Yahweh's sovereignty that he's bringing it forth. And there are many reasons as to why. So, something is coming. It'll bring about famine, financial hardship, economic hardship, Be prepared. Ensure. Nothing to be afraid. If you're a believer, there's nothing to be afraid of, right? But you must be prepared. Do you know the Lord for real? Are you in idolatry and you're following people who purport themselves prophets? So them to say, they don't speak anything to build you up, but rather they speak things to tickle your ears. They have not done their job to equip you for the times that are to come. They're serving you junk, feces, candy, cotton candy. They tickle your ears. Oh, your husband is coming. You're the bride fast. How is it you're the bride fast preparing you? How is words about revival preparing you? How are words about a wealth transfer preparing you to ensure that your love is rooted and grounded, as Ephesians 3 outlines? Words about living your best life. How in any of that is equipping you? It's undergirding you with the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, that prepares you for when times are rough, to ensure that you're built upon the rock. The prophets in America should be ashamed of themselves. But they have big platforms. They're not prophets. They're not. And as I said, many of them will be exposed. Not only by what will befall Israel, but what's going to happen in America. And of course, will affect all of us globally. Right? It's not something to be afraid about, but it is something to prepare for. Irrespective. Do you know the Lord for real? Do you depend upon your apostle, your prophet? Or do you have your own working, living relationship with Elohim? And that is what shakings do. And that is why Yahweh will allow shakings. He will sovereignly allow stuff like this, so that we will know that this is what also will engender separations. We will know of a certainty who really knows the Lord when shakings come. So, if you know in your heart of hearts that you don't currently have a living, working relationship with Elohim, it is time to start now. If you have to get off social media, get off social media. Get rid of those distractions. Get rid of the sin, as Hebrews 12 says, or Hebrews 13 rather, the sin that so easily besets you. That weight of those sins, get rid of them. That weigh you down. So that way, you're not burdened by the heaviness of what is to come. Remember, there's always a Goshen. But it is the remnant that has access to Goshen. And I speak in parables. Make sure you're marked. Season of exposure, season of separation is upon us. And separations come by shakings. Not only by exposure, but by shakings. Again, Yahweh can and does and will accomplish a myriad of things with one circumstance. Or sometimes two. He's not linear. So not only does exposure bring about separations, but also, as does shakings. Be warned and ensure you have a working, living relationship with Elohim. Get into the secret place. Get into the secret place. Shalom.